Are you a civilian now? That's what the Admiral hissed, right after slapping my father across the face. The sound echoed through the base like a gunshot, sharp, humiliating, unforgettable. My father wasn't a soldier anymore, just a visitor. A retired man who had once worn the same uniform with pride. And yet, in that single moment, the Admiral made him feel smaller than dust. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, eyes filled with fire he refused to show. And that silence? That calm? It was the calm before the storm that would end the Admiral's career. Before I tell you how one simple text destroyed everything that man built, you need to understand what it means to watch your hero be humiliated. You need to feel the rage that burns when someone mistakes rank for respect. Because this one cuts deep into the soul of every person who's ever been looked down upon by someone drunk on their own power. The morning sun cast long shadows across the metal gates of Naval Base Coronado. Soldiers moved in perfect formation during morning parade, their boots striking concrete in synchronized rhythm. The American flag snapped in the ocean breeze, proud and defiant against the California sky. It was supposed to be a routine visit, a father coming to see his daughter, a decorated Navy SEAL who had earned her place among the elite. My father arrived quietly, as he always did. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a man in civilian clothes walking through the gates with the confidence of someone who had earned the right to be there. He carried himself with that unmistakable military bearing, shoulders back, head high, eyes forward. Even in retirement, even in plain clothes, he moved like the warrior he had always been. But Admiral Renshaw didn't see a warrior. He saw what he thought was a lost civilian wandering too close to restricted areas. He saw an opportunity to flex his authority, to remind everyone within earshot who held the power on this base. What he didn't see was the storm he was about to unleash upon himself. Who authorized you to be here? The Admiral's voice cut through the morning air like a blade, sharp and accusatory. His tone carried that particular brand of arrogance that comes from a man who believes his rank makes him untouchable. He strode toward my father with the swagger of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. My father turned, calm and respectful. "I'm here to visit my daughter, sir. I was just asking for directions to." The slap came without warning. The sound cracked across the base like thunder, followed by a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Every soldier within 50 yards froze mid-step. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was shocked by what had just occurred. My father's head turned slightly from the impact, but his feet never moved. His hands remained at his sides. His expression didn't change, not anger, not surprise, just that steady, unshakable calm that had seen him through 3 decades of military service. He slowly turned his face back to meet the Admiral's eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "For asking directions?" Those 4 words carried more weight than any shouted command ever could. They hung in the air like an accusation, a question that demanded an answer the Admiral couldn't give. Because what answer could there be? What justification existed for striking a man who had done nothing more than seek help finding his way? I stood there in my uniform, frozen in place by protocol and disbelief. Every fiber of my being screamed to intervene, to defend the man who had raised me, who had taught me everything I knew about honor and dignity. But I was bound by military protocol, chained by the very system that was supposed to protect people like my father. I wanted to shout, to strike back, to make the Admiral feel even a fraction of the humiliation he had just inflicted. But then I remembered my father's lesson, words he had spoken to me countless times throughout my career. Never speak when anger is doing the talking. Never act when rage is in control. Let respect handle disrespect, and let character speak louder than any voice ever could. My father turned to me then, and the look he gave me communicated everything without words. It said stay calm. It said watch and learn. It said trust in something bigger than this moment, something more powerful than petty authority and misplaced pride. That look burned deeper than any insult the Admiral could have hurled, because it reminded me who I was and who had made me that way. The Admiral stood there, chest puffed out, believing he had just demonstrated his power. Admiral Marcus Renshaw, a man drunk on rank and intimidation, a career bureaucrat who had built his position behind desks rather than in battlefields. He was known throughout the base for using fear as his primary tool of leadership, for believing that respect could be forced rather than earned. He thought the uniform made him powerful, that the stripes on his shoulder gave him the right to humiliate anyone he deemed beneath him. He was about to learn that the uniform only exposed how weak he really was. Admiral Renshaw had never understood the difference between authority and leadership. He had climbed the ranks through politics and positioning, never through the kind of battlefield courage that forges true leaders. He commanded through intimidation because he had never learned to inspire. He demanded respect because he had never earned it. And in that moment, striking my father, he revealed the depth of his insecurity to everyone watching. He believed that civilian clothes made a man powerless. He believed that retirement meant irrelevance. He believed that his current rank made him superior to anyone not wearing the uniform. These beliefs were about to destroy him more completely than any enemy fire ever could. The aftermath of that slap spread through the base like ripples in still water. My father refused to report the incident, refused to make a scene or demand satisfaction. He simply wiped the dust from his jacket, dust that had been there before the slap, dust from his morning walk, not from any impact. Even that small gesture was dignified, controlled, purposeful. Soldiers exchanged glances, but no one dared speak. The story began to spread quietly through the barracks, whispered conversations that carried the weight of shared outrage. Everyone knew what they had witnessed was wrong, but the military hierarchy that should have protected the innocent had instead enabled the guilty. That night, I received a message from my father. Simple words that carried decades of wisdom. Stay calm. Never speak. Let respect handle disrespect. Character will handle this. I stared at those words for hours, trying to understand how he could remain so composed after such public humiliation. I wanted justice. I wanted retribution. I wanted the Admiral to suffer for what he had done. But my father wasn't angry, he was waiting. And in that waiting, there was a patience more powerful than any weapon the military had ever given me. 2 days later, a message was sent through official channels. It was simple, elegant, and deadly in its precision. To the officer who mistakes arrogance for authority, may your next superior teach you the meaning of both. Rear Admiral Callahan, retired. The message passed from one inbox to another, climbing the chain of command with the efficiency of digital communication and the weight of military protocol. It reached Naval Command within hours, landing on the desk of officers who recognized the name immediately. Rear Admiral James Callahan, a man whose service record read like a textbook of military excellence, whose decorations told the story of a warrior who had earned every honor through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The red phone rang in Admiral Renshaw's office that afternoon. When he answered, the voice on the other end was cold, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Admiral Renshaw, this is Admiral Morrison, Naval Command. Did you assault Rear Admiral Callahan during a visitation to your base 3 days ago? The world stopped. The air left the room. Admiral Renshaw's mouth opened, but no words came. In that moment, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The civilian he had slapped wasn't just any retired serviceman. He was a legend, a man whose name was spoken with reverence in Pentagon briefing rooms and military academies around the world. There must be some mistake, sir. I didn't realize. You didn't realize? Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the excuse like a sword. You struck a superior officer and you didn't realize? Are you telling me you assault people without bothering to learn who they are? The tonal shift was complete. In the span of a phone call, Admiral Renshaw had gone from predator to prey, from authority figure to defendant. The power he had wielded so carelessly was now being turned against him with surgical precision. 2 weeks later, Admiral Renshaw found himself sitting in a conference room, waiting for what he hoped would be a lifeline, a high-level position at a defense contractor that could salvage his crumbling career. The incident had been kept quiet, but his reassignment had been swift and absolute. He needed this interview more than he had ever needed anything in his life. The door opened and several officials filed in, taking their seats around the polished conference table. And then, at the head of the panel, calm and composed as ever, sat my father. Rear Admiral James Callahan looked exactly as he had on that morning at the base, dignified, unruffled, in complete control of himself and the situation. "You may sit, Admiral," my father said quietly, his voice carrying none of the emotion that Renshaw had expected. Or should I say, civilian? The color drained from Admiral Renshaw's face. His hands began to shake. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The power dynamic had reversed completely, and he found himself on the receiving end of the same casual dismissal he had shown so many others. But my father didn't gloat. He didn't sneer or make threats. He simply sat there, professional and composed, holding all the power in the room without needing to display it. That restraint was more terrifying than any show of force could have been. "Before we begin," my father continued, "I think it's important that everyone on this panel understand exactly what kind of officer we're considering for this position. Admiral Renshaw, would you like to tell them about our previous interaction?" The interview lasted exactly 12 minutes. Admiral Renshaw stumbled through explanations that satisfied no one, offered justifications that rang hollow in the conference room air, and watched his future evaporate with each passing moment. When it was over, he knew he would never wear the uniform again. Naval Command had acted swiftly once they understood the full scope of what had occurred. Admiral Renshaw was stripped of his command pending a full investigation. He was reassigned to desk duty while his rank was suspended, his security clearance revoked, his career effectively ended. The same subordinates who had once feared his temper now watched him pack his office in silence, the same silence he had once used as a weapon against others. My father never gloated, never celebrated the Admiral's downfall. He simply signed the incident report when requested, his signature neat and professional at the bottom of a document that would follow Renshaw for the rest of his life. Next to his signature, he wrote 2 words, "Character handled it." In the weeks that followed, I began to understand what my father had known from the moment that slap echoed across the base. He didn't need to fight back because he understood something Admiral Renshaw never had, that true power comes from character, not rank. That respect is earned through actions, not demanded through intimidation. That the measure of a person isn't found in their uniform, but in how they treat others when they think no one is watching. The Admiral had stripes on his sleeve, but my father had roots that ran deeper than any military hierarchy. He had built his reputation through decades of service, through leading by example rather than by fear, through understanding that true strength shows itself in restraint rather than in aggression. That day, I learned that power isn't measured by who speaks the loudest or who can make others afraid. It's measured by who stays calm when others lose control, who shows grace under pressure, who understands that silence can be more powerful than any shout. My father's patience had become his weapon, and his dignity had become his shield. I realized that revenge hadn't won, respect had. Justice hadn't come through retaliation, but through the simple truth that character always reveals itself, and that those who abuse their authority will eventually face those who understand what true authority looks like. In the military, we learn about chain of command, about following orders, about respecting rank and protocol. But that day, I learned something more important, that respect is a two-way street, that authority without character is just bullying in uniform, and that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. The Admiral had mistaken fear for respect, had confused intimidation with leadership, had believed that his position gave him the right to humiliate others. He learned, too late, that real power doesn't need to announce itself, doesn't need to strike or shout or demand acknowledgement. Real power sits quietly at the head of a conference table and lets character do the talking. As I watched Admiral Renshaw's career crumble, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Instead, I felt sadness for a man who had wasted decades in service without ever learning what service truly meant. He had worn the uniform without understanding its meaning, had carried rank without earning the respect that should come with it. My father could have destroyed him immediately. One phone call on that first day could have ended Renshaw's career in minutes. But he chose to let the man destroy himself, to give him enough rope to hang his own reputation. That patience, that faith in ultimate justice, was perhaps the most powerful lesson of all. The base felt different after Admiral Renshaw left. There was a lightness in the air, a sense that something toxic had been removed. Soldiers walked taller, spoke more freely, seemed to remember what it felt like to serve with pride rather than fear. The culture began to shift back toward what it should have been all along, a place where excellence was rewarded, where dignity was respected, where leadership meant inspiring others rather than intimidating them. I think about that day often, about the sound of that slap and the silence that followed. I think about my father's calm in the face of humiliation, his wisdom in choosing patience over immediate satisfaction. I think about Admiral Renshaw, wherever he is now, and I hope he learned something from the experience that made him a better person. But mostly, I think about the lesson that day taught me about character and power, about respect and dignity, about the difference between wearing authority and earning it. Because in a world where too many people mistake loudness for strength, where too many confuse intimidation with leadership, where too many believe that their position gives them the right to diminish others, we need more people like my father. We need more people who understand that true power whispers rather than shouts, that real strength shows itself in restraint, that genuine authority comes from character rather than rank. We need more people who know that respect isn't taken, it's given, and only to those who have earned it. The uniform my father wore for 30 years taught him many things, but the most important lesson came after he took it off, that who you are matters more than what you wear, that how you treat others defines you more than any title ever could. That character is the only rank that truly matters. If you've ever been humiliated for no reason, if you've ever faced someone drunk on their own power, if you've ever wondered whether justice really exists in this world, remember this story. Remember that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest, that those who abuse their authority plant the seeds of their own destruction, that patience and character are more powerful than any weapon. Remember that silence can be strength, that dignity is a choice, that respect is earned rather than demanded. Remember that one day, the same people who looked down on you, who dismissed you, who thought their position made them better than you, will have to look up to you for mercy. And when that day comes, when you hold their future in your hands, when you have the power to give them the same treatment they once gave you, remember my father. Remember his calm, his patience, his understanding that true victory comes not from bringing others down, but from rising above their level entirely. Because in the end, rank fades. Positions change. Uniforms are taken off and put away. But character stays. Dignity endures. And justice, true justice, always finds its voice, even if that voice chooses to speak in whispers rather than shouts. The Admiral learned this lesson too late to save his career, but perhaps not too late to save his soul. My father taught it through example, through restraint, through the kind of quiet strength that builds rather than destroys. And I carry it with me every day, a reminder that who we are matters more than what we've achieved, that how we treat others defines us more than how others treat us. That's the real power. That's the authority that can never be stripped away, the rank that can never be reduced, the uniform that never comes off. It's the power of character, the authority of dignity, the uniform of integrity. And unlike the stripes on a sleeve or the stars on a collar, These things can never be taken away. They can only be given away, and only by the person who possesses them. My father never gave his away. Not that day, not any day. And that's why, in the end, he won.